Boris Johnson has made a return at the 11th hour to urge voters to vote Conservative.
Yes, the former Prime Minister was met with cheers at a Conservative Party rally yesterday, but not all of his party are as hopeful. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman says it's over for the Tories and they should prepare for the reality of opposition.
Well, let's discuss this further with local government editor of Conservative Home, Harry Phibbs, who joins us now. Harry, it's interesting, isn't it, rolling out Boris Johnson at the last minute? Why do you think he did it now?
Well, I think that there's a bit of drama having a last-minute intervention. I think that would have probably been done by agreement. But a lot of people that I've talked to in different parts of the country that have been canvassing for the Conservatives, when they knock on doors, have come across people who say they voted Conservative in the past, but they feel that Boris Johnson was unfairly treated, that it was disloyal of the Conservatives to oust him, that there wasn't sufficient justification over it, you know, they're sort of ambushed by a cake and all that. And so I think that in terms of trying to get those voters back into the fold and persuade them to vote Conservative, obviously Boris Johnson himself coming out with this very strong, emphatic plea will have some benefit. I'm not saying it's going to transform it, but, you know, if you get the Conservatives get an extra point or two in the polls, it all helps. It all makes a difference.
Perhaps, although, of course, there's maybe a reason that the Prime Minister didn't want to bring out Boris Johnson until this last minute, literally the night before the vote. Is it because Boris Johnson particularly isn't all that popular in the country? In fact, it's hard to think of a single politician alive today who is reasonably popular in the country. This is a particularly dark time for our politics.
Yes, and I think that makes Boris, his qualities contrast very strongly, don't they? Of optimism, of good humour, self-confidence, resilience. I think it's also why Nigel Farage has had a big impact in terms of being a charismatic politician. That if you get Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak coming across as offering alternative brands of technocratic managerialism, that isn't particularly emotionally uplifting. So I think it's a shrewd move of the Conservative. Of course, he's a divisive figure, Boris Johnson. Of course, a lot of people are hostile towards him. But I think in terms of reconnecting with disillusioned Conservatives, I think there's a chunk of them that he will have managed to do that with, and I think that will be of some benefit to them.
Of course, it may be that Boris Johnson didn't want to help Rishi Sunak up to this point. As you mentioned at the start, there was quite a lot of beef potentially between the two, Rishi Sunak accused of stabbing him in the back a couple of times. It could be that Boris Johnson, seeing the polls, thought, you know what, I've got to show my loyalty to the Conservative Party and at least help right before people go to the ballot.
Yes, and of course, after Liz Truss went, there was, if you remember, for a time, it looked quite likely that Boris Johnson was going to make a comeback, and he sort of flew in and basically offered his services, and even then felt that there wasn't enough support in terms of Conservative MPs rallying round him for it to be a viable proposition. So that, I mean, there must be some element of him thinking, you know, well, you did have your chance, and I gave you another chance, and you've spurned me. But one would hope that there's also a belief in certain causes, a belief in Brexit. Obviously, is strong for him. A belief in wanting the Ukrainians to defeat Putin. Want a belief in freedom and free enterprise, and that therefore it would be a bit petty for him to just purely be thinking, "Oh, we'll serve you right." And so I think that he's probably genuine, that he's wanting the Conservatives to do as well as possible.
And yet, Harry, the Conservatives are not going to do as well as possible. If we look at any single opinion poll, and it is actually fairly rare that every single opinion poll under the sun is telling the same story, yes, to different degrees, but the same story, which is the largest Labour majority in this country's history and the lowest number of Conservative seats since that party was founded in 1834.
Yes, and I think as you've been discussing, the curiosity could be that we get this incredible Labour landslide, with Labour perhaps getting below 40% of the vote. I think Matt Goodwin was talking about 36%. I mean, that would be an astonishing thing. And for people like me who defend the first past the post system, because we want to have a clear government rather than sort of endless sort of coalitions and all the sort of messy deal breaking behind closed doors. I think it will be a struggle for us to defend the first past the post if we do get that astonishing Labour landslide, particularly if because of tactical voting the Lib Dems then form the main opposition. And it's a sort of bogus opposition, because the Lib Dems and Labour agree on everything, really, wanting a bigger state, more woke stuff, a great sort of climate change alarmism with net zero, more signing up to European Union rules. The idea we have a Labour government and the Lib Dems as the supposed opposition, completely agreeing with them about everything, would be a pretty unsatisfactory democratic outcome, to put it mildly.
OK, well, Harry Phibbs, thank you very much indeed for your insight. You're from Conservative Home.